Okay, so this tutorial is going to be on how to create PBR materials in Unity without using Quixel or Substance Painter / Designer. So first of all, I'll give a brief explanation as to what PBR is. So PBR, PBL or PBS is what you'll hear. Those technical terms mean physically based rendering or lighting or shading. The reason that games industry is switching to a PBR workflow is for consistency. So essentially what we used to use before was you'd either have pre-rendered cutscenes where all the materials would be rendered as they would like for sort of animated films. So it'd be a long process of rendering time to make sure they can render the reflections, etc. Or you would have very creative and talented texture artists who were able to mimic the look of something that was shiny by using just diffuse and specular maps. The problem that they have with that is that if you took one asset that had textures designed for a bright room, for example, moving that asset into a different room meant that that cleverly designed texture may not work and the material doesn't look the same as it did in each and every room. So essentially consistency was the biggest issue. You'll be familiar with V-Ray, which is used for pre-rendered physically based materials. Some examples are on this presentation of seeing V-Ray in action. One of which is, if you look at this, so in this example, you've got Game of Thrones, which has been using V-Ray to render materials on the characters, their weapons. If I skip forward on this to there's a section in here where he's running forward. And you can see the 3D characters, 3D horses, even the weapons that have been dropped in and pre-rendered to show the correct materials. Okay. Let's come out of that. There's also a video on here by Blur Studio called Blur. You can check it out in your own time. I won't sit and watch through this, but essentially you can see all of the PBR materials used in here. Blur Studios are renowned for their pre-rendered cutscenes of their games that they worked on. So the change, what's happened is Unreal and Unity now have the computational power to render in real time what was only possible as pre-rendered a few years ago. Example of that is Unity's most recent video that they did called Adam. So the whole thing's rendered in real time. And you can see, if I skip forward again, you can watch it in your own time. All of the textures look as real life as possible, but there's no pre-rendering going on here. An example of how long pre-rendering takes, in Transformers 2 film, one of those frames took 36 hours to render each frame. And remember, you got 24 frames a second, so that's why I think most of the films in slow motion. So we slowed it down to make it last longer. So yeah, so that's Adam. So check that out as well. Okay, so moving in to how to create your own. Or first thing you need to do is understand how light works when it hits different surfaces. So this top picture here is probably the main one to keep an eye on. If the surface of the material that you're using is completely flat, is a completely flat, smooth surface, then light's going to hit it and bounce away, and therefore give you reflection. So for that, think of something like glass. If your material isn't flat, so think of cotton or something like that. If you look at it through a microscope, it has a level of sort of bumpiness to it where light's going to go in, it's going to get stuck inside the material, and therefore not as much light's going to come back out of that material. Therefore, you're not going to have a reflection. It's kind of the easiest way to explain it. So that's why when you look at Unity, you will have an option for metalness and also smoothness. And smoothness, if you think of that as what I've just described, so how smooth is that material, therefore how much reflection are you getting back from it. Okay, finally, here's an example of a material. This is a Chesterfield couch. So it's the leather material with the brass buttons. And these are all the materials that would be used to create that material. So top left, you have the albedo or diffuse if you're old school. Below that, you can see the normal map. And then over here on the right hand side, this green one is the finished output for the metalness map, because within it, it has this map here, which is metalness, so that only the little brass buttons are metal. The rest of the material is obviously leather, which isn't metal, so it's just black. Over here, you've got an ambient occlusion map, so you can see where the shadows are being kind of concentrated around where the buttons are. And then this top left, over on this side, you've got the smoothness map. So even though you've got metals and material and something that isn't metal, they still have an amount of smoothness to them. So plastic, for example, that's shiny would still have quite a light colored map here in the smoothness. Okay, so now I'm going to jump into Photoshop and Unity to show you how we would create these maps. Okay, so first of all, if I just jump into Unity, what I've got here is a cube with this texture on, and this texture is using just an albedo and a normal map, nothing else. So the amount of smoothness and the amount of metallicness that you apply to it is only by using these sliders, and it's either fully smooth all over or fully shiny all over or not, which isn't useful because we want to have certain parts of it be more shiny than others, i.e. the brass sections. So that means we need to make our own metalness map. So jumping into Photoshop, first thing that you'll do to create a metalness map is take the normal map of your asset. So let me just open that, which is here. And in your channels of the normal map, if you look at just the blue, you've got a very, very close look at how you would create a ambient occlusion map. So you can either bake your ambient occlusion map yourself using 3ds Max or Maya or ZBrush, etc. Or you can try and create a ambient occlusion map by using the normal map. So take the blue channel out of your normal map to do it, which is what I've done with this one. So it's essentially, you can kind of see it's roughly the same map, but it's been tweaked. So I've pushed the levels to make these bits whiter and these bits a little bit darker. And then what I've also done, because of this map, if you look closely where the button holes are, there's a little sort of discrepancy here where it hasn't kind of kicked that out well enough. I've gone in and kind of just filled those areas in as best I could. Okay. So to make those maps, you start with this. You start with our ambient occlusion map. So with that, I'm going to select everything. So Control A. And the first thing I'm actually going to do is my image at the moment is set to just a grayscale. So I'm going to change the mode to an RGB because I need my red, green and blue channels. So the red channel is the metalness map, or the metalness area. So looking at the red, I know that we want the little buckles or the little button holes to be white, so because they're metal, and the rest of the thing to be black because it's not metal. So I'm going to go through and just select those first. I'm holding down Shift in order to select more than one piece. So these are the buckles. I want those to be white. Okay. And then I can do Control and invert, or Control Shift invert, sorry. And then the rest of the asset is black. So that would be, that's the metalness map done. Then we'll go into our green channel. So the green channel is your ambient occlusion. So this one, we would actually have, the buckles wouldn't be black, they would be white because they're sticking out. So Control Shift I again and just paint those back to being white. And then you may want to just push that map a little further. So just go into your adjustments, levels, and just push the black. So that gives you an ambient occlusion map. The blue channel isn't used unless you're going to use a height map. So the blue channel can be completely black. And then finally, we're going to add a alpha channel in here, which will give us our smoothness. And I'm going to pinch the ambient occlusion map in order to make the smoothness. So we're going to Control A on the green channel, copy, and then drop in by clicking on a new channel here, add an alpha map in. And then here we're looking at, so what is smooth and what isn't smooth. So really we want the little buckles, I'll bring my mouse a little smaller, well, these buckles, because they're metal, they're obviously going to have the most kind of shine and coming back from the most reflection, so they need to be white. Everything else in this area, because it's leather, but it's shiny leather, for example, you want to have it sort of a light grey. So I'm going to again just select, quickest way of selecting the opposite parts by selecting the buttons and then inverting. So select these again. Control Shift and I to invert your selection. And then with this, I'm just going to go into my levels, and we want to remove as much of the white. We don't want it to be too white because it'll be too shiny. And we also don't want too much of that blackness in there either. So you're kind of looking for something like this for the smoothness map. Okay, so what you're left with is a map that looks like this, which to most people would be quite unusual, not something that you've looked at before, but this is how the map should look. So if I just kick that out now, save that as my Chesterfield metalness map. I'm just going to drop it on the, I'll put it in the desktop inside just textures folder. I just think I was where I was. Make sure you save as TIFFs. Reason why is because TIFFs have alpha channels already set up in them. You work with them. And what you'll notice actually, I'll just cancel that. What I also did was in my layers, I locked my layer here. And I've only got one layer as well. You shouldn't have any more than one layer inside a metalness map. Okay, so let me just save that. rename it again. And then we'll jump into Unity. Delete that one, that was an old one. And I'm going to import that new file. Okay, so the difference that we'll see in the texture now, so if I use this one and drop it into my metallic, you can see instantly that we've got more shine now on the little button. And then I can also use that same map because we've built an ambient occlusion map out of it as well, so that can drop into there, which shows me more of the occlusion in where the buttonholes are, so it's darker in those areas. Now, just to explain and show how the height map works, I'm going to use this floor texture. So at the minute, as you can see, there's no sort of real difference in the height of this floor. What we're using in here is an albedo map, and then we've got this map here is being used in the metallic. We've got a normal map in there as well. If I just double click this and use it in Photoshop, if we go into the channels, the blue channel is completely black at the moment. It's not being used. And what I'm going to do just to show you how the blue channel works, if I steal the texture from the green channel and copy that into blue, you'll notice that the material in total turns blue. Let's quickly save that. And now that can be used as a height map, as well as a metallic map, and as well as an occlusion map. So I can drop that now into the occlusion, and I can also drop it into height. And that means that we can adjust the height of something by just using its texture and using the height map. And we're doing all of this by using just that same one texture. Okay, so that's how you do PBR outside of Quixel or Substance.